Howdy folks, welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory and today is Friday, June the 17th, 2016, and I have on the line quite possibly the biggest silver bug on the planet. His passion for silver runs so deep that the stock symbol for his second billion-dollar company is AG, the element symbol for silver. That is passion. I'm talking about, of course, Mr. Keith Neumeyer, who is the president and CEO of First Majestic and chairman of First Mining Finance. Welcome back to the show, Keith.
Well, it's great chatting, Rory. Thanks very much for your time.
Well, I appreciate all your time. And the last time that we spoke, you were actually in Switzerland, and I understand you're up in Vancouver right now.
Yes, sunny Vancouver.
And if you would, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe on our first show you had said that First Majestic had a record year for production in 2015. And what are your projections for this year? About the same as 2015? They're going to be higher? They're going to be lower? Because in my opinion, more silver is more better.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're making money, because producing silver at a loss is not very much fun.
No.
So, and unfortunately, when silver was down at the $13, $14 level, I could tell you it was quite the struggle, and we were fighting like crazy to get our costs down, and our costs are now down below $10 an ounce. So it's great. It's great that we were able to achieve that, but now silver's 17, so it's even better because not only did we get the cost down substantially, but we also, of course, had the improvement in metal prices, and to top it all off, we're now producing more silver. We had a record Q4, we had a record Q1. We produced 5.1 million ounces of silver equivalent in the first quarter of 2016, of which about 3.5 million ounces of pure silver, and the rest was in the form of gold and some lead and some zinc. And so we're looking to do about 20 million ounces of silver equivalent in 2016, and that'll be close to somewhere around 14 million ounces of pure silver.
Nice. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And the Federal Reserve decided on Wednesday, June the 15th, to give themselves another black eye and decided against raising the Fed fund interest rate, and which pushed gold, silver, and the miners higher. And then they were abruptly monkey hammered gold on June the 16th. And what short-term effect will the Federal Reserve's decision have on the metals and miners, and are there longer-term implications as well?
Well, short term, I just, it's almost a bit of a sucker's game trying to figure out what short term is going to mean at any, time. It's just, I don't think short term.
Okay.
I just can't do that because, we're running a multi-billion-dollar company. I got to think, long term, and as I do, when I make acquisitions, and in the case of First Mining Finance as well, we did 8. We just closed, as your listeners might know, our 8th acquisition just yesterday, and we've accumulated 14 million ounces of gold over a period of 14 months, and there's of course there's different views of gold out there. I'm a bull on gold and silver. I think that what we paid for those projects and what First Majestic paid for its silver projects back when I was accumulating that portfolio, back in 2004, 2006, people then thought I was crazy buying silver assets because I had a view on silver, and now I'm buying gold assets because I've got a view on the future of gold as based on all the things that we know are going on in the world. And you're not ever right instantly, but if I was to think short term, then I wouldn't be able to buy assets. I'm thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the future when I'm expecting the metal prices to be at multiples of where they are today.
Yes. And this 8th acquisition that you just mentioned, that's through First Mining Finance, is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
And Patrick Donnelly, the president over there, I imagine he's been a very busy man.
He
And
has, and the whole team has. The lawyers and the accountants, and we've been, to do. Your listeners, it's probably don't even, understand. How difficult it is to buy 8 companies in 14 months. First Majestic bought one, which closed in October of last year. That was the Santa Elena mine, which added our sixth mine in Mexico, and then the 8 acquisitions at First Mining. So just personally, I did 9 acquisitions in a period of 14 months, and I don't know of any one in the world that's done that amount of acquisitions in such a short period of time. So it's definitely a record for myself. I think it's a record in the mining space, and but it's all to do with my view on what's happening, in the macro environment, and what's going to happen long term over the next 2-3 years and beyond.
yeah, and speaking of the next 2 or 3 years, I mean, with all the excitement and upswing in the mining and junior mining stocks, are you guys already being approached for some of these acquisitions that you've acquired through First Mining Finance? I mean, or are you planning on holding them for a couple of years and let the market kind of mature a little bit more?
We've definitely been contacted, and we're in discussions right now on a couple of our projects. But the most recent ones we've acquired, I'm specifically referring to the gold assets in Canada. Those ones, we're going to hold close to our chest, and we're going to clean them up. We're going to unencumber them. We're going to buy back some royalties. We may build a road here and there. We might improve the infrastructure. We're going to be building core shacks, and to make sure all the cores properly secured and cataloged, and we're putting everything in digital databases now, and creating proper technical data for people. If they do want to look at the database, they can look at it in some uniform electronic format sometime down the road, and so those are the things that we're really focusing on. The Mexican portfolio, which we've got a fairly extensive Mexican portfolio, we're actually in discussions with a couple of groups right now to joint venture or sell some of those assets. So the lesser important projects, and when I say that, I don't mean to suggest that they don't have the potential. I just meaning that First Mining Finance has become very much a Canadian gold company versus a Mexican gold company. So we're very much focused on increasing our exposure in the Canadian gold assets, and decreasing our exposure on some of the Mexican gold assets.
Well, you answered my next question, and I'm very grateful for that because I
Okay.
was curious how it was going to unfold as far as people looking at your database and so forth and making a determination. And it sounds like everything that you originally envisioned First Mining Finance to be is really starting to come into its own at this point. And I
Mm-hmm.
love it. I mean, I love it for you. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's I think I surprised myself to be quite to be honest with you, because when we went public in April, we had our list, right, of targets, and we had our top 10 target list, and we hit the road pretty hard, and I was I had a personal goal of doing 4 acquisitions in 2015, and I thought, oh geez, if we can do 4 acquisitions, that's going to be a pretty darn good thing. And all of a sudden, we got 5 done, and then 3 basically announced within the first month of 2016. So 8 deals in 14 months. It's just amazing. So I think the management team should be patted on the back for what they've accomplished, and then now it's just time to focus inward a little bit, and really start building on the assets that we've acquired, and it's quite exciting, because if you look at the province of Ontario, we pretty well own now. First Mining Finance pretty well owns every single gold development project there is in the entire province.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's just crazy.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And my guess is, Keith, is that you're a new fan of MX Gold Corporation, which is a junior mining company that announced that they're going to be withholding a portion of their mined gold from the market. And this company is following your lead. And I presume you still believe this to be one of the better moves a mining company could make in order to break the back of these now confirmed rigged precious metals markets. And in your opinion, Keith, where do we stand in breaking the back of these rigged markets? Are we, the gold and silver community, the investors, are we any closer to overwhelming the algorithms and fraudulent paper market, or where do you see us standing at this point?
I think it's interesting because since China has now started fixing gold in yuan in the Chinese currency, which has only been like 3 months now, or a little over 2 months. We haven't seen one of those big $50 down days. Where you just had this huge raid on the metal, and you'd have gold down $100 in a matter of a couple of days. It's just so I think that's a positive turn of events. I think that as more players start entering this market, and I think we're seeing that, and we're going to start seeing a silver fix as well coming up shortly. They've announced they're going to do it. I haven't seen a date being announced yet, but I know they're it's in the works. So it's gonna prevent these typical bullion banks that have been manipulating this market for the last decade to really smarten up. They're just not going to be able to do it. There's just too many eyes on it. There's too many players in it. And it's just not going to become possible anymore for the rigging to occur. And I think it will just slowly disappear over time. And I'm optimistic that we will get into a much more healthy market over the next few years.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think that we saw the first signs of what you were just referring to yesterday, when the beatdown that came in gold in particular came after the LBMA closed. Because if that had occurred during the LBMA hours, then I was reading Eric Dubin over at the News Doctors. He did a great analysis of this, and he was saying that if that had occurred during LBMA hours, then there would have been a massive offtake of gold, and they couldn't have that. And so I think you're spot on with what you're saying, is that the SGE is already having a small influence, and as time goes by, that influence is only going to grow, especially if they bring on, or once they bring on, a silver fix as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And as you may know, Donald Trump signed an agreement with one of the larger online bullion dealers back in, it was either 2010, 2011, somewhere around there, for a 30-year lease agreement, and their deposit on the property was in gold. And at the time, Donald Trump vowed to do more transactions in gold as his trust in the dollar was waning. And do you think that a Trump presidency would be gold positive, or do you think it would be simply business as usual as what we're seeing today?
I think it will be gold positive. I think that, of course, Donald Trump is very controversial.
Yes.
And, as a Canadian, we don't, we're not obviously voting for Donald Trump, but, I quite honestly hope he gets in, because, I think he's going to really shake up the current system, and the problem is, we've just got too many career politicians that just doesn't matter what stripe they're wearing. They all do this exactly the same thing. And they make these promises coming into office, and of course they get voted upon. And this is not just the United States. This is all around the world. And of course, once they get in, they do exactly what the old group, the old party was doing, and then nothing ever changes. And and people are getting really tired of this, and that's why we're seeing, individuals like Donald Trump start to get popular, and there's a lot of European politicians that are also, very flamboyant and outspoken, who are also getting quite popular. In Canada, we elected a 40-year-old prime minister that was a school teacher, and that just happened a few months ago. So the world is changing because people are just getting fed up with these career politicians. And I'm hoping, and I think Trump is one of those individuals who he may have to follow the line in some aspects of what he's going to do once he gets in power. But I think when it comes to his stance on auditing the Fed and changing the way the system works in Mexico or in the United States, getting out of other people's hair, not going to war so easily, as prior administrations have. I think the world will be a safer place, and I think that the U.S., the country of the United States, will become stronger as a result of some of the policies he's going to bring in, and I think that'll be good for the world. And I'm optimistic that he will try to at least start to break up, the financial system, the way that it's been operating over the last several decades. So maybe I'm unrealistic, being so optimistic about it, but that's my position. I think that he will come in and make change.
Well, I join you in your optimism. I mean, we have to believe in something. I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm a believer in Trump or anything of that nature. I'm just saying that there has to be at least a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, and I think that he kind of represents that light,
Mm-hmm.
for change and for moving away from business as usual. And the Brexit, what are your thoughts on Brexit as far as it impacting the gold and silver markets? I mean, do you see that as having any kind of effect at all, or is it just going to be another event that impacts Europe?
Well, the EU, was really created, as a part of this whole world government, thinking process. There's been a move around the world, by some very, very high level thinkers, who have been manipulating governments and politicians in order to all basically combine over time to create, a one world government. And I'm completely against one world governments. I think that each country should be autonomous. I think, I think that's what makes our world interesting. The fact that we do have different cultures and we do have different belief systems, and and so on and so forth. And I think there's a lot of value in that. I think that for the world to be under one government, under one religion, or under one system of banking, or under one of anything, I think is dangerous. So the breakup of the EU, I think, is a positive thing for the planet, because it's a slap in the face, of those individuals who have been trying to create this whole one world society, and they were making some inroads, and now it's really the people who are standing up and saying, we don't want this, it's great in my view to see the people actually starting to beat down some of these politicians who are these, as I said earlier, these career politicians who, in my mind, are not, acting in the best interests of the world's population. They're just acting in the best interests of whatever power is pushing the strings, but behind their face.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and I look to what's happening with the Brexit as once again another sign of major change and the people rising up together and saying enough is enough. We've had it with you guys. We have had it. We tried it
Yeah,
your way. We didn't like it. We want to change.
yeah.
And with some of the largest investors on the planet moving into gold and paper gold and miners. Help us all to understand why it's important to pay attention to what these people are doing with their money, and equally as important, what are you doing with your money right now, Keith?
I think I'm on record probably over a dozen times, or probably much more than that, saying I'm all in, and I'm First Majestic and First Mining Finance are really my two largest positions. Like 99% of my net worth is in both of those companies, and then I no longer own any real estate. For my belief that the only place to be invested currently in this environment is in gold and silver, and I think I'm going to be dead on with that call. And when I put together First Majestic back in 2002, 2004, and built out its portfolio, started acquiring assets and so on, then became the second largest silver producer in Mexico. My thesis was very much, that we would, see much higher silver prices. And we did for a short period of time, but, of course the shorts came in and they were able to, bring the market down. And it surprised me, the power that they were able to bring into the marketplace, and then move the metals the way they did. And it was all to do with them, just experiencing the pain, because they had such a huge short position when the silver price was up at $40 and $50. Well, today it's a completely different environment. That large short position looks a lot different than it used to, and there's a lot of bigger players now long this market, and then they weren't long the market before. You didn't see some of the big names ride up the gold price. Everyone just missed it. So everyone, of course, talked it down. Now you're seeing people of quite prominent stature in the investment community starting to talk about gold, and we haven't seen that before. And that's what's going to make this move different. When this move starts again, which I think it's already started, the metal prices are going to go much higher, because you've got all these very important investors that are actually going to benefit from this move. And you're not going to see, in my mind anyways, you're not going to see that big, huge, manipulation on the sell side trying to hold the metal prices down, for the simple fact that all those, you can call them manipulators if you wish, or whatever, they're all on the other side of the market. They're all on the long side of the market. So I'm excited because the base that we're starting from now, if you call, let's say, 1350 low on silver, and call 1050 low on gold, going back to 2002, we had $250 gold and we had $5 silver. So silver went from $5 to $50 as a 10 time move, and you go from 1350 times 10, you're at $135 silver. So I don't see that being unreasonable at all. And that puts $8,000 on gold, and those are the kinds of numbers I'm expecting are going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years.
So I don't see that as being an unreasonable call in light of some of what I've heard other analysts say. I mean, they've been in that same range, $7,000 to $10,000 range for gold. I mean, that's what do you think that our world would be a lot different place with $8,000 gold, or do you think that it would still function and be the same type of world that we have today?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's because there is a theory out there that's floating around that the central banks need to have gold at whatever number, pick a number, $10,000 an ounce, in order for them to be able to pay off all their liabilities, and that would be the reset. That would be the beginning of the new you know, financial system, where all the government's liabilities would be erased to zero, and we would basically just start over, with a new currency, and so on, backed with metals and so on. So, look, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm certain these discussions take place, among the G20, and they probably, quite frankly, probably don't know what to do to fix the debt problem. But I think we would agree that the current debts of the world cannot be repaid, and there has to be another system brought in order to correct or reset, the world financial system. And I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't mean a war, because obviously, a war would, fix that. I'm hoping it's done with sane minds, negotiating around a table and coming up with a new system, and backing with gold or silver. To me, makes a lot of sense.
We can only hope that cooler heads prevail.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe coming together for something similar to a Bretton Woods, or something of that nature. Maybe
Yes.
would thwart a nuclear exchange, which would benefit no one, in my opinion, not even the ultra wealthy.
Right.
So,
And I think an individual like Trump is probably much more equipped to start those types of discussions. He's on record saying we can't pay our debt, and everyone knows he loves gold, and you walk into any of his buildings around the world, and there's gold everywhere. So and he said he's not supportive of the central bank. He said he wants to audit the Fed. So there's a lot of stuff that goes through his mind that I think could be the basis of the early discussions of making a change of the world financial system, rather than having someone like a Hillary Clinton in there, which is just part of the old way of doing things. She's part of the war complex, and
yep.
She would likely go and drop some bombs on Iran, just to heat up the Middle East a little bit more, just to get access to some more oil or something. I don't know, or for whatever reason she would do it. I just so
Because
anyway.
it's Friday reason.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense to do that. So let's go drop some bombs, right? So.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, like I said, we can only hope that cooler heads prevail, and that $8,000 gold just means that we have gold at $8,000.
Yeah.
So, but Keith, is there anything we should leave the audience with before I let you get back to your afternoon?
No, I think we pretty well covered everything. It's obviously, a pretty interesting period, with the Fed not raising rates, and likely not going to be raising rates for any time soon. I don't expect any rates to go up anytime in the next 6 months, anyways. And this Brexit thing will be really interesting. I'm heading over to Europe in 2 weeks, and it'll be after the vote, and I'm going to be anxious to sit with a few of my friends over in London over some pints, and have a discussion with them about what's going on, because I know my friends in London are for Brexit, and they're voting for the removal from the EU. So there's a lot of people pushing that.
I would love to be on a fly on the wall in that room with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been speaking with Mr. Keith Neumeyer, who is the CEO and president of First Majestic, and he's the chairman of First Mining Finance. And you can follow Keith over on Twitter at Keith_Neumeyer. And Keith, I certainly appreciate all your time this afternoon.
Well, thanks very much, Rory, and sorry for the ringing phone in the background.
It's all good, my friend. We will talk with you soon.
Okay, you have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.